What I'd like to do now is I'd like to share them. I think that you can benefit a lot from hearing other people's. What you think might not bother you all that much, but if Jen brings it up, one of her 8 over here, no. If Jen brings it up, you might think, oh, that really bothers me too. I need to be thinking about my behavior when that's going on in my classroom. So what I'd love to go ahead and do, since everyone just ate, we'll get you up briefly for a moment. Let's go ahead and just put them over here on the door. So we'll do it one at a time, and then what I'd love to do is share them. So as you're walking over there, just briefly say what your hot button was. Does anyone want to go first? Megan? Go for it. Just on the door right there. And then if you want to just share what your hot button is.
When a student looks at you like they're listening, and then they do the opposite thing. Right after you told them. And then lying.
Oh, that's a good one.
Yeah.
Here, we'll just go around. Do you want to go next?
Lying, whining, parental indifference, picking on older children, picking on younger children, and throwing of big objects.
Big objects.
I just said whining and then pretending to be helpless.
Oh, yeah.
Okay, well.
It's sticky on
Oh,
both.
yes, they're also sticky.
It's sticky on like all 4 corners.
Wow.
Okay, this is sort of hard because I'm out of the classroom, so I don't have a lot of hot buttons for kids except scratchy. But
Thank you, Montrose.
I realized I have a lot of hot buttons with adults. And instead of writing adults who act like 2-year-olds, I wrote, and adults are not open-minded to Chinese strategies.
No, I'll just keep doing the same thing.
Carly, you want to go next?
Yeah.
Unless it's about me, no, then you can put it up.
Lazy is my hot button.
I could be taking a few words.
I didn't put anything for kids that don't work a lot. I put no shows. I have a lot of families who totally make an appointment and then they don't come. I mean, I'm getting paid, but still. It's kind of annoying.
Gotta look at the positives. Dan, you want to go next?
I put plates being thrown on the floor at lunchtime.
Plates being thrown at lunchtime. I'd be really disappointed if someone did that in here.
I wrote adults using sarcasm with children.
Beth, do you want to go next?
Being lied to.
What was that?
Being lied to
Being lied to.
makes me really angry really quickly. And in my classroom, bossy children who don't follow the rules but tell other children.
Oh, yes.
Yeah.
That could be applied to adults as well.
I put punishing children instead of teaching child why behavior was inappropriate.
Ooh. There's a lot of adult ones on there.
Angela?
Yes. When a co-teacher is not engaged in a conversation with classroom management, and then when a student knows they've done something inappropriate, and then they change the subject when you try to talk to them about it.
Distracted with Laura. Go ahead.
I put not following through. Don't say you're going to do something and then never actually do it.
Mine were crying uncontrollably and bullying.
Bullying?
My child is crying and can't be consoled because it's not me to help them. It's just, and then ignoring me. And be like, hey, hello, can I talk to you?
I know you can hear me.
I know you can hear me. I like to kind of give you that look. And then wanting to constantly be held.
Mm-hmm. Bullying.
Oh,
Or throwing tantrums like hitting our kids on for going outside. Like kicking and screaming. And then 2 minutes later I look over and they have all their clothes on. What was the point?
Yes?
I have when children dump out entire buckets of toys for fun, and then they go to the next bucket, they dump that out too. That too.
Yes. That patience piece. Wait. Jen?
Well, I realized I didn't listen to the instructions from grade one.
That's okay.
Which then I realized is one of my hot buttons with kids when they listen to the instructions.
In your defense, I didn't write them down, so.
As being interrupted, whining, the child not trying first before they ask for help, and when another adult repeats what I say right after I say it.
Thank you, everybody, for sharing those. Does anyone feel like they identified a new one in themselves from someone else's?
Yes.
Yeah, definitely. Like I said, it's really important to know those because, I mean, those hot buttons, they are going to affect your behavior in the classroom. You know, even the morning that you had. Even if that hot button was that you forgot to go out and start your car, and this is one of my hot buttons, I hate getting into a cold car. You forgot to go out and start your car, you know, that may, even in 2 hours, that may affect your behavior in the classroom later. So it's important to remember those things. So thank you for sharing those. I hope it wasn't painful to share those with me. So then, by definition, challenging behavior is any repeated pattern of behavior that interferes with learning or engagement in pro-social interactions with peers and adults. So it's behaviors that are not responsive to the use of developmentally appropriate guidance procedures. And like we just talked about, that can look like a lot of different things. This bottom bullet point just talks about the different ways that challenging behavior can look in different children or in different adults in your life. So just before we get started with kind of the rest of the session, I want to touch on this slide, looking at challenging behavior in infants. I think sometimes, and this might be from a parental standpoint, you know, if I were a parent, that sometimes infants might get overlooked because they might not see it as challenging behavior because it's not as easy to recognize as it is with preschoolers per se. You know, in infants it can look like feeding challenges, sleeping challenges, but some parents might just, you know, chalk that up to, oh, just a baby, you know, just an infant, haven't really figured it out yet, you know, maybe it's their firstborn, something like that. So it's important to remind parents that challenging behavior can be presented in infants as well. That being said, it's also really important to remember that each child is born with a different temperament. So although it's very important to, you know, pay attention to challenging behaviors and how they affect you, it's also important to remember that children are born with different temperaments. So it's a tough line, but you want to try to distinguish between what may be their temperament and what may be a challenging behavior. And we're going to talk about identifying that challenging behavior a little bit more shortly. So now we're going to do a quick little activity, and it's actually similar to an activity that we did way back in session 1. And for the group that took sessions 1 through 7 in the summer, it was like way long time ago for you. Well, what I'd like you guys to do is think about your current level of skill and experience, your comfort level with behavior support plans, whether it's developing them or implementing them or, you know, assessing them later. Think about where you are on that continuum. And there are signs all around the room. First sign is just got the engine started. Next sign is on the road but experiencing some mechanical issues. Next one is warmed up and ready to roll. And the last one is your vehicle is set on cruise control. Therefore, you're feeling very efficient. You feel like your behavior support plans are very effective. So there's different signs. There's one here, 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 and one on the door right here. We kind of ran out of wall space. They don't stick to this very well. But if you could, go ahead and take a couple minutes to place yourself around the room. But before we move, does anybody have any questions about those directions?
This is for our class in general.
And this is for you as an individual. It can be based on experiences that you've had with your class specifically right now, but it's you as an educator, where you are in that. Sound good? Okay, so go ahead and throw yourself up there somewhere. two more slides. This one's just barely got the engine started, and then this one is,
We should have.
on the road, ready to roll.
I am efficient.
And these don't have to be 110%. Of course, you're never gonna feel 100% effective and efficient every single behavior support plan, because then you should be running our country or something. But, so those of you guys that are feeling like you're set on cruise control, tell me about that a little bit. Kind of tell me about what your experiences are with behavior support plans.
I've done everything from write them to implement them to, have them already written and then, just meet a child for the first time or meet children for the first time and have them already sort of in place and effective and continue sort of ongoing support.
So you've been kind of involved in the whole process. You've been just thrown in even after it's written and you're working with the child. You started it from the beginning. Awesome. So I'm going to throw some notes on here just so we can look at them later as we're looking at strategies throughout the rest of the session. So Susan, if you don't mind me asking, who was involved in one of those behavior support plans? And anyone else in the room, feel free to jump in.
Caregiver specialists, parents, classroom teachers.
Anyone that's on cruise control, has anyone ever had someone involved in a behavior support plan that maybe seemed a little bit, not out of the ordinary, but not as common as other behavior support plans? And I can kind of say where I'm going with
What
this.
do you mean by not as common?
What we're going to talk about partnering with families a lot today, teaming with families. And what I'm trying to remind people is that it's important to remember that the families, or not necessarily families, but anyone who's directly involved with this child, on a daily basis, they're going to have a lot to say. They're going to have a lot of information to give. So it may be a grandparent instead of a parent, because grandma or grandpa takes the child every day after school until 9 o'clock when mom or dad gets home. So it's important to think outside a little bit, think outside of the box a little bit.
Well, I would add on along those lines, because I've always worked in public schools, so the kids come 4 days a week. I have done plans where I've worked with the other child care provider that they're out on Monday.
Okay.
So that there's an attempt to implement the plan across all child care settings that they're in their week. And depending on the experience and, I'll just say some partners are more interested in engaging the process and others don't.
I was gonna say something like I happen to be working as, I guess, like a nanny, but I happen, because of my background, wanted to read the child's IEP and had a very close relationship with his classroom teachers when they dropped off and picked up, and was hired because of my background to implement all of the goals on his IEP and implemented different strategies. So, because of my background in training and interest, but I, by title, I was a nanny. So, babysitters, nannies, that would be, I guess, like a more uncommon person. And
No, that's a
more
great
involved,
example
like
of
what
position.
Shelley said.
I would say too, sometimes outside, private providers, like speech therapists, PCBs, like that are working outside of the normal school setting, that our parents are seeking out privately.
So can you guys think of any interventions, and this, might be tough to think about right on the spot, but any interventions that you've used in the past?
That can look like a full
Yeah, that's a million.
gamut from making an individual Tucker the Turtle story for an individual child. I mean, that could be.
But can you think of one that stuck out to you? I would just love to throw some interventions up here, that
Okay.
just so, when we're sitting here later and we're thinking of different things, these can be used to, come up with ideas or other strategies that might branch off of one of these.
And
looking for like,
prevention, are you thinking teach, are you thinking any of those things?
Yeah, any of those things. Any that might stick out in your mind.
or stuff like that.
I think there's something that I've almost always tried to include in a plan when there's family is a part of the team with teachers, is having some sort of notebook or journal that goes back and forth, that teachers have a way to communicate with parents about how the child's day was or how things went, and parents write in the same book and comes back in the backpack. That's something that almost no matter what the target behavior is, I try to make part of the plan. So that it's not like this isolated meeting that happens and then months go by and it's hard to meet again, but there's this continued way for people to communicate with each other about how progress is being made.
I think that's a great one.
I would do a lot of like replacement behavior charts where it's you want to see a specific behavior instead of the one that they've been doing, and then that goes home. And you like, I don't know, do stars if they get it, and then at home sometimes they'll get like 10 minutes of TV from their parents if they got so many stars.
Well, thank you for sharing those couple. I just want to, like I said, use them later to maybe jog memories or help with ideas. So in the past, have you guys collected data? Would it be fair to say you've always collected data?
Every time that I've called something a behavior support plan, part of the process is collecting data. And I would say that one thing I've learned from make that, really encouraging teachers and parents to collect data is that sometimes, I don't know why exactly, but sometimes just the act of collecting data, all of a sudden things get a lot better. And we never even go through all the rest of the steps because the teacher collects data and the parents too, and they're talking more as a result of it. As a result of having a sit-down meeting where they both agree to collect data, and maybe inadvertently they're also changing their behavior or they're noticing a pattern, which makes them adjust the schedule of their behavior without any of those things having been concretely written down, but all of a sudden the behavior gets better. So I just say that as a added incentive to encourage all you guys to do that time in trouble, because people often resist it. Like, I already know when it happens. I don't need to fill out your fancy chart, tally mark. Sometimes it feels like busy work to teachers, but I can't tell you how often I see when people go to that trouble, all of a sudden the behavior just gets better.
You realize also a lot more about what teachers are doing. When, if you have that time, even 15 minutes or free play or lunch or snack or outside, what teachers are saying and doing, if we can really truly be objective observers of behavior analysis and really truly like be, if we have the time, like Shelley was saying, true, like what teachers are really saying, like no, don't, instead of please share it, you know, just positive framing, all of that, it, like Catherine just said, it's already an indicator of what might be the antecedent and what just might be the triggers you already see.
So it might help you look a little bit more analytic.
Just
for an analytic
data collection helps. Exactly.
Awesome.
I find this is often, like Evan said, the most challenging part of it. I mean, of anything, always, I think collecting data, anecdote, however you do it. And I find that this is often, I think, a place where teachers struggle is just to know how to get started and like what format to choose and what am I trying to collect data on. So the more clear you are on specifically what you're collecting data on, and then I've found over the years that I always, if you take the time, a little bit of time up front to individualize any of whatever the forms are that you're using to that child, that specific behavior, it makes it a lot easier to collect the data and kind of that garbage in, garbage out concept. And if you spend a little time up front individualizing your forms, then the data that you're going to get out at the end is going to be much better. And then I think that's just one of those things that takes time and practice to get good at, just knowing kind of how to make a form that's going to be helpful.
How to organize your thoughts. Yeah, I would definitely agree with that. Awesome. Well, thank you for sharing that, everybody. Does anyone else have, anywhere around them, have anything that they wanted to add, whether it's to this list or an experience that you had in the past?
I will just say one thing, I think too, the more that you engage in the process, I think that it's something that you start to internalize more when you see a similar behavior happen, and you start to just naturally do some of the things that you had been doing in the past, so that you don't maybe get to a point where you need that to be writing a positive behavior support plan, because you just start to internalize, recognizing some of the behaviors, and then just understanding what you should implement in terms of that prevention and teach kind of piece, I think. So I think it's something that over time just it improves your practice, so that it's not something that over time you may not even need to be writing positive behavior support plans within your classroom, because you're more effectively addressing behaviors as you recognize them.
In an effort to prevent kind of those challenging behaviors.
And I think in the beginning for folks, it can be a really good process to go through, to kind of help improve your practice and get you to the point where you've internalized those things a little bit.
So you might be doing them without having to. Awesome, cool. Well, thank you, everybody. Thank you for doing that activity. And for you guys for sharing. So now we're going to move on to talking a little bit about what positive behavior support plans, when they began, a little bit of research behind them. We all know, or I think it's okay to say that we all know it's an individualized process. It was based on values and empirical research, and it was started in the 1980s, fun fact for the day. But what it really is an approach for developing an understanding of why the child engages in problem behavior, and what the strategies are for preventing the occurrence of problem behavior while teaching the child new skills. So what we're looking at is, why is the child exhibiting challenging behavior, and what strategies can we implement to prevent that behavior, all the while teaching new skills to that child, teaching more appropriate skills. All in a day's work, right? So a little bit of research behind behavior support plans. Growing evidence indicates that an assessment-based approach results in more successful outcomes than other approaches to behavioral intervention. In addition, this well-researched and comprehensive approach holds promise for long-term resolution of challenging behaviors. And I know these statistics these research points are a little bit outdated, but I think that if we were to get research from yesterday, from this year, I think it would say a lot of the same things. That, an assessment-based approach is going to lead you to more positive, better outcomes. So we're going to talk a little bit about behavior supports and what it looks like for infants and younger toddlers. Does anyone want to read that little blurb for me? Right? Oh, you guys want to fight it?
Go for it.
Thank you, Jen. Thank you, Maria, for going through.
Intervention approaches for infants and toddlers must be focused on the parent and/or caregiver interaction and the child. Intervention approaches typically include teaching the parent or caregiver interaction skills to assist the infant and toddler in coping with difficult situations, regulating sensory input, understanding routines, and supporting the child's language and social development.
Thank you for reading that. So I really think the big takeaway there is that these intervention approaches for infants and young toddlers specifically, they need to be focused on those interactions between the child and the caregiver. We know that children at this age might need more one-on-one attention. They're not quite as independent yet. So these approaches are going to be the most influential, the most successful when we're focusing on that interaction, that social interaction between a child and their caregiver. So just a few things to remember when supporting infants and toddlers. Early intervention is essential, and it says up there it's not too early, it's never too early. I think everyone in this room would agree with that. The earlier you start, the sooner it can become, a better learning environment if it's in the classroom, or just, better social interactions for the child in question. It's important to evaluate physical and medical history and child's current status. Again, assessing developmental status, doing a screening is very important. I know Shelley may have a lot of experience with that. The natural environment is the optimal location for an intervention. So whether that's in the home, whether that's in the classroom, places where a child, that's their natural environments where they spend a lot of their time. And actually, so next what we're gonna do is we're gonna watch a brief video, but I just realized that I forgot to locate all the handouts with everybody. So if everyone could take just a few minutes, I'm gonna go over the handouts really, really quickly. Was everyone able to locate the handouts on their zip drive? After all the PowerPoint slides, I'm just gonna zip through them really, really quickly. This first article is actually a really great article. It's not too long, doesn't take too long to read, but it's talking about recommended practices when it comes to addressing those challenging behaviors in children. It's a great article. And the child in Little Lambs would be so cute. And then it moves on to another article in regards to recommended practices when it comes to infants and toddlers, like we were just talking about, things to remember. This roadmap to behavior support plan is actually something that we're going to use in an activity later. We're going to answer these questions, kind of look more in depth at our vignette child. So this is actually a great handout. I think it might be one of my favorite handouts if it isn't the next one in this session. But it talks about family questions and answers. Like I said, we're going to talk about, Susan, you're right over there? Yeah. We're going to talk a lot about, how important it is to involve a family and to partner with a family. So these are a lot of questions that families might be asking you. And then the next handout is talking about when you're speaking directly with families about problem behavior. And these are some of the things, and of course these can be, subjective and up to each person, but it's talking about, in general, the do's and don'ts when it comes to talking with families. It's important to remember, and we're going to watch some videos that kind of exemplify this later, that this could be really challenging for families. This could be a really difficult time in their lives if they're dealing with this child who they love very much, but this child is exhibiting a lot of challenging behaviors and making their lives fairly difficult. This next sheet of paper is a handout that we're going to be using for one of our activities. And then the next handout, 16.7, is a checklist that talks about all of the different steps for developing all the way to implementing a behavior support plan. And I know I always say this with the checklist, but I'm a big list writer. These are great to have because if you're developing and implementing a behavior support plan, go ahead and grab this and go through these steps and see if you've met all of these checkable boxes. And then this next piece of paper is an action plan that we'll reference in a slide later. And like I always say with these handouts, these can be very, very helpful to you later. And these can be applied over all kinds of different things. It doesn't have to be with a behavior support plan. These can be applied over many different, projects that you're working on or children that you're working with. So feel free to use these as they will be helpful to you. Then the next handout is a lot of different resources. And it's great because you have them electronically, so you can just go ahead and click on links right there. And then the last handout is your thoughts. So my sincere apologies for forgetting to do that earlier. Does everyone feel good about those? Okay, perfect. So then, like I said, the next thing that we're going to do is we're going to watch a video about challenging behavior. And these children are anywhere from 2.5 to 5 years old, I believe. And what we're going to do, or what I'm going to ask you to do, is just pay attention if you want. Go ahead and choose a child. And we are going to help try to identify what the challenging behaviors are that child is displaying.